and the Analyst for their take on SKT's clutch Game 4 win.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And coming into that one, I think, Kobe said it right at the end there, is that both of these teams take hold when they get the chance. And that's the coolest thing to see. We see a lot of teams when they're ahead, they kind of, halter a little bit and they don't get themselves into the win. But these guys, even straight from picks and bans, and we'll start with Monty, go for the win right out of the gate.
Some things I noticed in the picks and bans phase here. Well, when we saw SKT on the red side in Game 2, they decided to ban that Shen. And we know from the interview earlier and just from the fact that we haven't seen Sword in a while, SK Telecom said, we don't really have a good read on NaJin Sword. And so they prioritized that Shen pick very heavily, but NaJin Sword was so adept at countering it. And then by the other side of that, they banned it. They used a ban on it. And then in this game, there was no ban, and it wasn't even taken by Sword at all. So I think they had a bad read, thought that there was going to be very high priority, and instead it turned out not to be that way at all. And that really opens up their game. The other thing that's interesting here is that SK Telecom picked Corki in their first rotation. Now, this is a team that usually lets AD carries fall down the picking order, and Piglet kind of gets the scraps, what's left over. And I think this is a really big respect to both Prey and the power of Corki right now that they went so aggressive on this particular pick in the pick and ban phase.
And I think it actually speaks to a really good adaptation by SKT as well. You talked about how it takes them a game or two to warm up, and they start to understand their opponents better. And one thing I've noticed from this series is basically counter-picking the top lane. Every top laner who's picked second has won his matchup, right? Game 1, Jax against Shen. Domination there. Forgetting the name, by Xpession. And then here, right, you talk about the read on Shen and whatnot, letting the champion go through. Xpession blind picks the Jax and says, all right, Impact, bring whatever you want against me in lane. Impact shows up with Renekton, beats him soundly in the 1v1 and says, haha, I can beat you here. And then in the mid lane as well. Ahri shows up first, and you let Faker counterpick with Orianna, at least what he perceives to be the counterpick there, and lo and behold, Faker wins the lane again. And so suddenly you have the team saying, wait, if we pick ours later, we can get a good matchup and win out here, and I think that's a new adaptation as well by SKT.
Yeah, it seems that when SKT, even though Bengi got first blooded here, and he was 2 buffs behind, like Watch had finished his entire jungle path before he even started. Bengi's so good on Lee Sin that he can pull his team together and make the plays happen. And also I want to point out, Ahri's 0-3 so far this series, and Renekton's 2-0. It seems like people have the answer to Ahri, and for some reason people just don't have the answer to Renekton. That's just he's just such a strong laner. I don't think between these two extremely skilled players, the person who wins lane is just going to snowball and have more game impact.
In Crepo, someone that was not in your eyes, but really on your mind this time was Piglet coming back into this one.
Yeah, Piglet definitely played really, really well. He turned those bot lane fights around. The first time Kane actually went in with a good hook, Piglet actually managed to survive, but later on they fought 2 against 2 and they actually won that trade super hard, and then Piglet started carrying the bot lane, and that allowed SKT to really grab hold of the game. At the same time on top, Watch from Sword ganked twice, Renekton Impact dodged that twice, managed to get Bengi back into the game. Bengi actually started on 1 buff, as Double F pointed out, and Sword had 3 buffs. But by the second buff rotation, it was the total other way around. SKT invaded blue buff, managed to secure 3 buffs for themselves, while Sword stuck on 1. So it's really incredible to see how a team can go from so far behind to so far ahead in such a short time span.
And I really want SKT to win this series because I feel like when Sword wins, it's a struggle. They have to really work for that win. It takes a long time.
Why do you say it's a struggle? Where are they falling behind?
They just don't beat SKT as convincingly as vice versa. When SKT wins against Sword, it's a stomp. It's just a complete crush. You know what's going to happen when the 4K gold lead, that happens. And then when Sword gets a 4K gold lead, it's there's these close team fights Faker does, things Faker does, and it's just a big struggle, especially in team fights just closing out the game. It takes forever.
And I think you're right about that. Faker doing things that Faker does has been a big part of when he's actually allowed to make plays. And here it's interesting because it took me a while to realize why he's good at Orianna. Because she's not traditionally the same kind of playmaker as Ahri. It's a departure in a way of a Faker champion. But what he's done really with this series is comboed with Bengi. He's used Lee Sin as ball delivery and shockwaved and set up kills and whatnot. And then after kind of a bit of a lead would roam down and sort of gank with his team, would show up to 3v3s or 3v2s and make plays from there. And that's what's really opened the doors here with his Orianna, is he's showing up with his team fighting incredibly well and getting ahead. and on top of the fact that their duo lane is snowballing, that they're winning the 2v2 matchups time and again, it actually works really well. He can just show up with his team and make plays.
At the same time, you gotta hand it to Pumandu. He had a rough 3 games first, and then he got caught a lot. Now he shows up in Zyra. There's a typical Crepo 4-1 in 6. Steals alpha kills.
Well,
carries a little harder than the typical Crepo though. But yeah, no, I really liked what he did. He kept going into those trades. He wasn't afraid of dying, afraid of getting caught. He just played the game as if it was a new game, and that's really important when you play these games. Just start fresh all over. Forget what happened in the earlier games, and yeah, Piglet and Pumandu played really solid this game.
Final thoughts, Double F.
Yeah, one thing I like about SKT is they don't fall victim to tilt. When Faker has a bad game, the next game he's like, okay, this is a fresh game, I'm going to play well. When Pumandu gets caught a million times, he's still not afraid to play aggressive. He doesn't get tilted and discouraged. He plays the way that he plays, and he's just confident that he's practiced this way.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we have to take a quick break right now, but when we return, it's the exciting conclusion of this epic battle between SK, Telecom T1, and NaJin Black Sword. The next team to take down a Nexus will win a trip to the Staples Center and a shot